Charles in Fremont. Hey, Charles, you're on with Willard and Dibs. What's up?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what do you think is the cause for the 49ers defensive struggles the last game that they lost? I mean, they talk about Wilkes and this and that and players. I mean, you guys are watching the games too, right? So there has to be a cause for all of a sudden we got defensive struggles. And then when we started playing earlier, we were playing fine. Is it that the teams are tougher? Or we had easier teams in the beginning? What do you think it is?
I think even that's a little bit too simple. Charles, thanks. Here's how I would answer it. I think that the 49ers accidentally ended up with personnel changes. I know we look at, it's the same defense. It's not the same defense. I think there are personnel changes that made the 49ers more susceptible to the run. That's what I think. I think that there were a number of players who were good at stopping the run, and they've been replaced by guys who aren't as good. You know, and I didn't even know this that much about Javon Hargrave. Like, Hargrave's a really good defensive tackle, but he leans in the direction of being a good pass rusher as opposed to a run stopper. And as we know, like, if you let the other team run on you, it opens up everything else. And so if you can't run and you can't stop the run, you're dead in the league, and that's what they've looked like the last 3 weeks.
Yep.
And so I think there have been some personnel changes that have made it difficult, and they are not getting the production out of the opposite edge rusher from Nick Bosa that they thought that they would get, and that is fundamental to their philosophy. And so that's why Chase Young is on the football team now.
Right, and you look at not just Javon Hargrave, but Eric Armstead in the interior, and Javon Kinlaw, who has been an ongoing disappointment.
Yeah, hot and cold.
You know, you haven't had, Hyder Jr. up there, and you haven't had other defensive line pieces that have helped clog the middle, and that gives Warner and Greenlaw a chance to have a free run in the run game, and it hasn't been the case the last few weeks. And if you look at time of possession, they're losing the time of possession battle, which is something that Shanahan never wants. He wants to be the one to exert his will. No Trent Williams in the left tackle spot has kept you from really being effective running the football. So it's kind of been a catch-22. You haven't been able to run it or stop it on the other side.
I just think as a football team, and I don't know how you snap your fingers off of a bye week and fix this, you have to be able to come from behind. And right now the 49ers look like a team that game script to open a game is so good. But if you go all the way to the 10-yard line and fumble, and the other team then goes the other way and goes up 7-0, seemingly that's a bigger problem for the 49ers than it is for most teams, because it takes away to a degree what they want to do to you offensively, and it takes away what they want to do to you defensively. And the proof is in the numbers. They have not been able to come from behind. Like, maybe if it's 7-0, but as soon as he gets to 10-0, like, you're playing this catch-up game, and you have to be perfect, and you get to that fourth quarter, and if you're down by 8 or more, we already know. Fait accompli.
Right, in the fourth quarter.
So, that for me is kind of the realization I'm coming to. It doesn't mean that the season is lost, because they are really good at getting the lead. They are really good at throwing the first punch. But when they don't, it becomes a quicker problem than it should be. And that's the one thing I'm looking for. And I don't know what the snap your fingers fix is to that. Then get the lead. Okay, but you're going to get into the playoffs in theory and maybe fall behind once or twice.
Sure.
You got to be able to handle that.
Right, and you haven't been able to handle it. And of late, you've had a turnover issue, 8 turnovers over the last 4 games, and you had 3 in each of the last 2 games, which is not something that any team wants. But when you're trying to be a ball control team and you're trying to run it, when you've got a quarterback throwing fourth quarter interceptions and your defense is unable to stop the other team, that's not a recipe for coming back in football games. And we talked about how the Niners like to approach offense, and they don't like to go 3 wide and 4 wide. They almost never go 4 wide receivers. And when they go 3 wide receivers, a lot of times it still isn't going to be, having Brock Purdy just sit back and sling it all over the field. So your offense is not built by design to be one that comes from behind.
Let's go to Gary in San Ramon next up here, Willard and Dibs. What's up, Gary? What are you doing?
Hey, man, great analysis, guys. You really come up with some really good stats. I was really surprised by the Ebicon stat, Mark.
Yep.
But anyway, my point being is that Trent Williams has not practiced all week. Shanahan alluded to the fact that he may have something more than just a low ankle sprain. So now you've got Banks is out, Trent's doubtful, and you've got backups on the left side of the line. So that's the strength, and that's one of the reasons McCaffrey's getting shut down, forcing Purdy to try to beat you with the pass. And it hasn't worked the last 3 games. So I'm saying that not addressing the offensive line situation from last year to this year, I think has been a big mistake.
Gary, thanks. It's definitely a fair conversation to talk about how they've built this offensive line if it ends up continuing to be a struggle point. Because at the beginning of the year, a lot of people were like, man, I don't love what they did there with the offensive line. And then the production was great. And are they just always a Trent Williams injury away from suddenly not being good? Maybe. Is it fair to as a coach or general manager say, yeah, we lost our future Hall of Fame left tackle, and so we haven't been as good? I don't know how deep you want the offensive line to be. There's no replacing Trent Williams. I also want to say we're getting a little ahead of ourselves about an injury designation for Trent this weekend. He did not practice today, but he usually doesn't practice on Wednesdays. However, Kyle also did say that this is worse than they thought, and it is healing slower than they thought. He still stopped short of calling it a high ankle sprain. He says it's still showing up as a low ankle sprain, but because of his history with ankle injuries, he's having a hard time at his age getting right. I don't know if that means he's going to sit out this game. Doesn't sound good.
Right.
And based on exactly when things started to go south for the 49ers, let me think. Hang on. They were, right when Trent got hurt. They were up 7-0 against the Browns, and Trent got hurt. And they have scored 17 plus whatever.
44 points since I think.
Then in almost
11
3
quarters,
games.
yeah.
So, yeah, not good. Not good if he can't play this weekend.
And you can't really insure yourself against losing the best left tackle in football and one of the best left tackles in the history of the game. It's just not the way depth works on football teams. Now, you've got other pieces that you can go to. Jalen Moore has stepped in, and he's done okay.
Yeah.
He's not Trent Williams, and no team has 2 Trent Williamses. You don't just have an extra one that you can throw in there. And I think when you look at the killer bees in the interior, for the most part, they've been pretty solid. And, when you go to address your offensive line needs, there's only 2 different ways to do it: free agency and in the draft. And in the draft, they've kind of addressed other things of late, and defensive line has been one of them. And they haven't always hit on the defensive linemen that they've drafted. I mentioned Javon Kinlaw already as a guy who struggled a little bit. You've drafted wide receivers in the top of the draft. Those have worked out. You've traded picks near the top of the draft to get a quarterback. That didn't work out. You traded the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and a 5th to get a running back. That did work out. So you haven't had a lot of draft capital to use on a left tackle. I do think that this year in this draft, wherever they pick, and right now their pick is trending toward being better than they would like based on the losses they've had, I would bet that in their 1st or their 2nd pick, they're going to get a tackle.
Not a bad idea, especially if Trent is, he flirted with retirement after last year, so you never know when that's going to come.